Every era of automotive history produces a machine that seems almost ordinary at first glance, yet the closer you look, the more you realize it carries the fingerprints of an entire cultural moment, a machine shaped by shifting expectations, rising engineering ambitions, and the constant tug between practicality and personality. This story begins in a time when drivers wanted confidence without excess, character without complication, and a sense of purpose built into every mile, a time when a simple three-box silhouette could hold surprising depth. What makes a car from that period truly stand out is not a loud headline number but the way its engineering, its intention, and its presence quietly influence the people who use it. As we trace that path, you will see how a vehicle can rise from understated to unforgettable through persistence, refinement, and the subtle art of problem solving. If you enjoy deep dives that peel back the layers of automotive history, remember to like, subscribe, and comment the next topic you want explored. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori enters this story as a sedan shaped by necessity, refined by pressure, and remembered for the subtle clarity of its design choices. It represents a moment when the company focused on building a car that would appeal to families, commuters, and enthusiasts who demanded confidence without complication. To understand how the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori earned its place, we start with the environment that shaped it. The late 1970s had left many drivers wanting something honest, stable under daily strain, and capable of handling changing expectations for efficiency and durability. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori carried these expectations while trying to move beyond earlier engineering inconsistencies. This meant refining the chassis, tightening assembly standards, and presenting a sedan that felt approachable yet purposeful. At its core, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori emerged as a product of restraint. Its square silhouette was not an attempt at styling spectacle but a way to deliver straight sightlines, a clear sense of space, and manufacturing efficiency. Many buyers at the time valued a sedan that felt predictable, and the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori delivered that predictability through a driving experience that favored steadiness over extremes. Its layout offered balance for typical commuting, while its powertrain gave enough response to handle highway merges and busy traffic patterns. Drivers looking at the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori often noticed how its packaging made everyday life easier. Cabin access was straightforward, the trunk opened into a usable space, and visibility was wide enough to reduce stress in tight parking areas. If you inspect the details of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori, you find evidence of engineering decisions that tried to solve frequent frustrations. Simple mechanical interfaces reduced repair headaches, the engine bay layout improved accessibility, and the suspension tuning aimed for comfort over complicated sport tuning. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori also carried an important symbolic role. It was expected to show that measured progress could exist even when budgets were limited and competition was intense. When owners compared the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori to a rival, they typically noted how it traded headline performance for a kind of unfussy steadiness. It met expectations by avoiding unnecessary drama and focusing on the basics that made commuting feel less stressful. The most interesting part of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori is how it merged simplicity with subtle ambition. Its twin-cam powertrain lineage gave it a quiet sense of capability without intimidating the everyday driver. Examining the cabin of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori shows how ergonomic decisions reflected the preferences of the era. Clear gauges, upright seating, and resilient materials formed an environment that could endure long travel and varied climates. The use of straightforward mechanical systems in the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori meant that owners could maintain it with reasonable confidence. Service intervals were manageable, and the design resisted unnecessary complexity. In many ways, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori was a balancing act between evolving regulatory demands and the desire to preserve driving feel. The engineers avoided extremes and focused on making each component work in harmony under normal conditions. While the styling of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori appeared boxy, its crisp angles and clean proportions gave it a functional honesty that appealed to drivers who valued clarity over ornamentation. It is worth recognizing that the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori was not built to dominate any single category. Instead, its purpose was to blend comfort, efficiency, and reliability in a way that made the driving experience transparent and predictable. What makes the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori compelling today is not a single standout feature but a collection of decisions that reveal how the brand aimed to rebuild trust. Every adjustment to its structure, its tuning, and its interior served the goal of stability. The ride quality of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori exemplified its philosophy: soft enough to ease rough city pavement yet supportive enough to hold composure during extended highway travel. Owners who drove the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori through a variety of conditions often commented on its calmness. The chassis absorbed daily wear with quiet confidence, and the engine provided a consistent feeling of readiness without sudden surges. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori reflects the engineering priorities of its moment, improving longevity, refining comfort, and ensuring drivers felt secure even as automotive standards continue to shift. When we look closely at the materials used inside the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori, we see a thoughtful approach to durability. Textiles were chosen for resilience, switchgear favored clear movement, and surfaces were designed to handle constant contact without excessive wear. Its mechanical simplicity did not limit its character. Instead, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori developed a kind of modest charm that resonated with drivers who wanted a car to feel cooperative rather than demanding. The development path of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori reveals how the engineering team balanced ambition with realism. They refined proven components, reinforced known weak points, and arranged the structure to handle high-load situations with confidence. Even the steering feel of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori communicated clarity. Feedback was steady, inputs were predictable, and the system encouraged drivers to trust the car in crowded lanes and changing road textures. The decision to continue evolving the powertrain in the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori reflected a belief in measured progress. Small improvements created a more polished experience without overwhelming the platform. The braking system of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori also followed this pattern. Engineers sought controllability and endurance, allowing drivers to respond smoothly during daily commutes and unexpected slowdowns. By anchoring itself in practical strengths, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori built a reputation as a sedan that supported its owners through changing driving environments. The car adapted to seasons, traffic patterns, and traveling needs with balanced composure. What stands out most about the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori is how it represents stability during a time of automotive uncertainty. It succeeded not by offering spectacle but by offering trust. Through this lens, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori becomes more than a product of its specification sheet. It becomes a case study in how thoughtful engineering can produce a sedan that holds its value in everyday experience. This segment closes by reinforcing the significance of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori as a reflection of practical automotive evolution. The vehicle symbolizes how careful refinement can create a lasting impression even in a crowded market. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori moves into a deeper phase of its story as we examine how its engineering decisions and market position created a sedan that balanced ambition with restraint. The platform faced the expectations of drivers who wanted dependability, modest running costs, and a sense of control at a time when automotive technology was expanding but still carried uncertainty for many buyers. When we evaluate the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori from an engineering perspective, the central theme becomes refinement under pressure. Every component had to perform reliably across diverse climates and road conditions, and the engineering team understood that consistency mattered more than headline specifications. The powertrain of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori reflected a steady evolution of the twin-cam philosophy, designed to deliver a smooth torque curve and maintain responsiveness without creating undue strain during heavy-stress scenarios. This approach let drivers accelerate with confidence while keeping the experience predictable for commuting and long travel. Underneath the squared bodywork, the suspension geometry of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori revealed careful tuning that balanced body control with comfort. springs and dampers work together to minimize bounce on uneven surfaces, while still maintaining a tactile connection between the driver and the pavement. The steering of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori demonstrated a commitment to clarity. Input response was gradual and linear, giving drivers the ability to position the car with confidence on narrow streets or winding suburban routes. The chassis structure of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori depended on careful reinforcement at key stress points, allowing the sedan to maintain composure during highly loaded conditions such as full cabin occupancy or rough asphalt. This stability contributed to a sense of durability that owners often appreciated. As emission standards tightened, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori integrated solutions that focused on reliability rather than experimental complexity. The engineers aimed to keep the system serviceable and understood that dependable compliance benefited drivers who relied on predictable maintenance routines. When compared to another manufacturer, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori often traded ultimate speed for balanced performance. Its strength rested in a package that delivered enough capability without compromising daily comfort. The interior design of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori mirrored this philosophy. Clear switchgear, upright seating, and rational layout choices created an environment that supported long-term usability. Materials were selected not for temporary visual appeal but for resistance to wear. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori emphasized longevity through fabrics that held up under constant contact and plastics that resisted fading under sunlight exposure. Even the driving posture of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori contributed to its sense of calm. Visibility lines reduced stress during urban driving, and the upright angle helped reduce driver fatigue on extended highway trips. Examining the finer details of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori reveals an intention to streamline ownership. The layout of the engine bay allowed technicians and owners to reach key components without excessive disassembly, and this simplicity built a reputation for accessibility among drivers who valued hands-on maintenance. The cooling system of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori was also designed with practicality in mind. Engineers enlarged airflow passages and optimized the radiator placement to maintain stable temperature ranges under high-load circumstances. Beyond its mechanical systems, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori participated in a broader cultural shift. Drivers sought cars that felt rational and composed rather than overly complicated, and the sedan emerged as a reliable participant in this trend. While rivals sometimes focused on bold style or cutting-edge features, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori embraced moderation. It delivered a dependable experience that appealed to those who preferred stability over spectacle. The aerodynamic character of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori, though limited by the angular era, still reflected an effort to reduce drag and wind noise through clean lines and tight panel alignment. This improved fuel economy and made highway travel more serene. Braking control in the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori followed a predictable arc. Pedal feel aimed for progressive engagement, giving drivers confidence during sudden slowdowns and routine stops. If we study its drivetrain behavior, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori created a linear transition between gears, supporting smooth progress through traffic. Gear ratios were chosen to keep the engine within a friendly power band, especially in city conditions. Owners often appreciated how the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori blended mechanical honesty with a sense of resilience. The car could handle daily mileage without drawing attention to itself, and that quiet dependability became one of its defining qualities. The structural alignment of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori helped reduce interior vibrations. The cabin remained composed even on uneven surfaces, contributing to overall comfort. This focus on refinement extended to the small details. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori used durable door hinges, robust latch mechanisms, and resilient window regulators to reduce long-term maintenance issues. On the road, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori demonstrated stable tracking, holding its line predictably at highway speeds. Drivers found the sedan cooperative and easy to position in traffic. Under heavy stress, such as full occupancy or steep inclines, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori maintained its composure. the engine delivered enough torque to handle normal demands without overworking, and the suspension absorbed the additional weight with steady support. Even the sound profile of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori carried intention. The engine tone remained consistent and controlled, avoiding intrusive harshness while still giving subtle feedback. The evolution of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori reflects a practical engineering mindset. Each component was chosen to improve reliability without adding unnecessary complexity. The purpose of this sedan was not to redefine performance but to refine what daily drivers valued most: predictability, comfort, and long-term serviceability. Enthusiasts who revisit the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori today often appreciate how clearly its engineering priorities show through. It speaks with quiet confidence rather than bold claims. From an ownership perspective, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori stood out by offering a harmonious driving experience. Its systems worked together to create a sense of reassurance, especially for drivers navigating changing road conditions. Maintenance records from period owners often highlight how the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori remained cooperative under routine care. The car rewarded consistency with long-term stability. The success of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori can also be measured by how it helped reinforce trust in the brand. The sedan presented a grounded, reliable face that appealed to drivers who needed an honest solution to everyday travel. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori reaches its most revealing stage when we examine the long arc of its influence. A car that began as a practical sedan gradually became a reference point for how measured engineering, transparent design choices, and honest performance could create a durable legacy. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori did not rely on spectacle. Instead, it built its reputation through calm consistency, proving that a dependable platform could matter just as much as high-profile innovation. When we consider what followed in its market segment, we see how the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori helped define expectations for daily usability. Buyers increasingly looked for cars that paired efficiency with comfort, and the sedan delivered this formula with clarity. Its design language, defined by straight edges and balanced proportions, made the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori a symbol of rationality during a period when styling trends were shifting towards sharper clarity and functional geometry. The result was a sedan that reflected its era without feeling overstated. That visual restraint allowed the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori to age with a kind of quiet confidence as preferences evolved. Drivers who owned the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori often discovered that its legacy extended beyond its immediate performance. The sedan built trust through predictable handling, approachable mechanics, and components designed to endure daily repetition. Many of these attributes shaped how later family cars were evaluated. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori showed that buyers appreciated vehicles that delivered comfort, clarity, and reliability without overwhelming them with experimental technology. As the years passed, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori became a reference point for enthusiasts who valued straightforward engineering. Its structure could handle modifications, its powertrain encouraged hands-on engagement, and its suspension layout provided a solid foundation for tuning experiments. This versatility helped the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori maintain relevance among hobbyists long after its production run ended, reinforcing the idea that dependability can support creativity. Culturally, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori grew into an emblem of accessible motoring. It appealed to families, new drivers, and budget-conscious owners who needed stability without sacrificing personality. The sedan allowed people to travel long distances with confidence, and its mechanical transparency encouraged a sense of partnership between driver and machine. That connection built loyalty, and the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori became part of many personal histories, commuting to work, taking weekend drives, and carrying daily responsibilities with steady composure. The sense of familiarity it offered was not accidental. The engineers who shaped the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori understood the importance of intuitive operation, and they designed the vehicle so that owners could feel in control even when facing challenging weather or worn urban roads. From a technological perspective, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori served as a transitional anchor between mechanical simplicity and increasing regulatory demands. Emissions controls tightened, safety expectations grew, and manufacturers across the industry were adjusting their processes. The sedan responded to these pressures with a philosophy of refinement rather than reinvention. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori showed that practical solutions could meet evolving standards without compromising driver trust. This approach influenced how future development cycles unfolded. Stability, accessibility, and durability became priorities across many vehicle categories. The long-term reliability of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori also contributed to its standing. Owners discovered that consistent maintenance yielded steady performance across thousands of miles. This endurance made the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori valuable in regions where road surfaces varied widely, fuel quality fluctuated, or maintenance resources were limited. The sedan became a dependable partner in circumstances that demanded resilience. Owners frequently relied on its clear mechanical layout to complete routine service with confidence. Spark plug access, fluid checks, and belt adjustments were positioned for simplicity, reinforcing the sedan's reputation for cooperation. In retrospect, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori helped set expectations for what a practical sedan could offer. Comfort became an essential metric, predictability mattered more than extreme performance, and the driving experience needed to feel composed under varied loads. These values influenced how manufacturers approached development for decades, and the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori played a role in establishing that foundation. Its evolution also demonstrated the importance of balance. The sedan did not attempt to dominate any category but instead aimed to excel in the areas most relevant to everyday drivers. Today, enthusiasts view the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori with a sense of appreciation grounded in its purpose-driven design. Its boxy styling has become a recognizable hallmark of its era, and its mechanical clarity represents a version of automotive engineering that prioritized honesty over complexity. The sedan's character endures because it reflects qualities that remain relevant: durability, usability, and a driving feel that supports confidence without demanding expertise. When we consider its impact across decades, the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori stands as a reminder that cars do not require extremes to become meaningful. They simply need to understand their purpose and serve their drivers faithfully. That is the true legacy of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori, and it remains firmly embedded in the story of practical automotive evolution. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori concludes its story as a sedan that earned respect not through spectacle but through a focused understanding of what everyday drivers needed. Its clarity of purpose, measured engineering, and calm driving character allowed it to build a legacy that feels surprisingly durable. When we revisit the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori with the benefit of hindsight, its strongest qualities stand out more clearly. It showed that a family car could offer stable handling, accessible mechanics, and reassuring long-term performance even in an era defined by shifting expectations and tightening regulations. The appeal of the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori rested in its balanced execution. It delivered enough power for confident commuting, a suspension tuned for consistent comfort, and a cabin layout that supported long trips without fatigue. These traits made it approachable for new drivers and dependable for experienced ones. The sedan built trust by responding predictably to varied road conditions and by maintaining composure under full occupancy or high-load moments. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori also demonstrated that practicality does not need to feel dull. Its angular silhouette carried a kind of purposeful honesty, its drivetrain offered smooth cooperation, and its mechanical simplicity invited owners to engage with their cars rather than feel intimidated by them. Enthusiasts who look back at the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori often appreciate how its engineering choices reflected realistic goals. It was a car built to serve, to endure, and to give families a sense of stability during a changing automotive landscape. Many of its decisions influenced broader expectations in the market. Reliability became a priority, ergonomic clarity grew in importance, and the overall driving experience shifted toward comfort and confidence rather than extremes. This perspective reveals why the 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori remains meaningful today. It captures a moment when honest engineering aligned with what drivers genuinely wanted, and it showcased how careful refinement can leave a lasting imprint. The sedan's story closes with a simple truth. The 1980 Fiat 131 Supermirafiori succeeded by knowing its purpose, fulfilling it consistently, and proving that thoughtful design can create a legacy that outlives trends. Its influence endures not because it dominated headlines but because it supported the everyday journeys that define real automotive history, reminding us that the most impactful cars are often the ones that quietly do everything well.